All right, let's get started here. Welcome everyone to this webinar on how to win in the competitive kids content landscape. And this is a timely topic right now because we have KIDSCREEN coming up in just a few days. So I'm really delighted to be talking about kids content. It is pertinent for several reasons. We've all been kids. We all have enjoyed kids content at some point, and many of us today have our own kids. In addition to that, just objectively, it is a compelling market as well. So it makes sense to have a dedicated conversation with an expert in the field as we're doing today. So with that, let's get started. Before we dive into the topic today, just a reminder, if you have any questions through the conversation, feel free to use the Q&A button that you'll see in the Zoom panel here and submit your questions. We'll leave time towards the end of the conversation to just take questions from the audience. All right, so with that, let's get started. I'm delighted to have Dominic here with me. I will let him introduce himself. Dominic.
Hi, Arjun. Thank you for having me, and thanks for this opportunity today. I'm Dominic Gardiner. I'm the founder and CEO of Jetpack Distribution. We are an international distributor specializing in children's content. So hopefully I can add some insights which will be useful for everybody today.
That's very exciting. So Dominic, since we're going to talk a bit about KIDSCREEN today, could you shed some light on what your experience with the kids market has been? How many years have you been in this space? Your career trajectory? How long have you been going to KIDSCREEN, etc.?
Interesting you said in your intro, we've all been kids once. I've been in kids TV so long, I feel like I never kind of grew up. I pretty much started in kids TV, so it was 27 years ago.
Wow.
And I started at the advent of what became, a dedicated children's television. Whereas I think, anybody who grew up in the 70s will remember there was only maybe 1 or 2 channels in every country that showed maybe 1 or 2 hours of children's content. By the time I started in it in 96, it was the age of cable and new channels and dedicated channels for kids. So yeah, no, I think I've seen everything from, growing up with 1 channel and a couple of hours right through to where we are today, which is just almost an infinite choice for our own kids. So it's quite exciting, always changing, always driven by technology and driven by kids, love of discovery of different and entertaining and educating things that kids want to watch.
Yeah. So you've been one of the pioneers of what is the modern kids industry, if I may call you that. Could you talk a bit about what got you into kids content in the early days? You mentioned there was very little content. Why did it start making sense to have dedicated television channels back in the day? You worked at Cartoon Network, for example.
Yeah.
Why did it make sense to do that? And where is this going now?
I think up until that point in the early 90s, animation had been produced, probably for, 50, maybe 60. I can't remember exactly the very start, but let's say 50 years of content. And at that time, there was a question of like, where's it all going to go? Because if you'd seen Tom and Jerry, you maybe saw a couple of episodes on your primetime channel, and suddenly there was the need to put all of these shows which have been produced in the past onto 1 channel, but also there was a desire to create new and exciting series that were more relevant to kids today. And so that was really the explosion of channels that were dedicated, and that also started to break down the kids market from just being, kids to the genres and then the age groups within, from preschoolers to teenagers, and everything in between. And I think that's where we started to see a much more brand-driven marketing approach that was for building channels and brands that contained the content that was being produced at that time. Yeah, so really, when I was there, this was really just starting. The explosion was coming, and a lot of it was quite local back then. There was local channels all across the world. Not everything was global, but obviously Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon in those days were just starting to look at their global footprint and how they could export from the US into Europe and Asia and Latin America, and that took us into the 2000s.
Gotcha. And we'll talk a lot more about what the current streaming industry looks like. So I'm excited to dive into this topic with you today, and thank you for being here. So for those who don't know me, I'm Arjun Mendhi. I'm the founder and CEO of Molten Cloud. Molten is a cloud platform that provides services to media companies such as Jetpack Distribution, Dominic's company. We primarily focus on three things: rights management, royalties management, and content management. So production companies, distribution companies, streaming companies use Molten across the world for their back office operations. Now, that puts us in a pretty interesting position where we get to experience different business models. We get to service different business models. We also join our clients, such as Dominic and their business, on their adventures many a times, supporting their contract deal structures, supporting their business models, etc. So from an objective perspective, we get to sort of see the different industry segments in the film and television space primarily, the different nuances, the different economic models, the different content requirements, etc. So excited to continue our webinar series and today focus on kids content. So with that, let's go a little bit deeper. Here's the agenda for today. We're going to start with a high-level landscape overview of the kids content market. We'll talk a bit about how businesses such as Jetpack are thriving in this space, and then sort of evolve more into what are these winning strategies for KIDSCREEN. So taking a slightly closer look at just KIDSCREEN so that Dominic is able to share some of his experience with our audience members here today. And then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So with that agenda, let's start with the landscape overview. So kids content landscape is actually a really fascinating and high growth area, just objectively from a business and metrics perspective. So let's look at the opportunities here. Today's kids are referred to as the iPad generation. They're growing up with an appetite for content. As Dominic mentioned, back when we were kids, there was probably, one or two kids content shows on primetime TV, but now there are so many outlets that the kids are growing up with this expectation that content they like will be available. So if you put some numbers to it, here's a staggering statistic. Kids in the ages of 8 through 18 now spend on average about 7.5 hours in front of a screen, primarily for entertainment each day, including 4.5 hours spent watching TV. So you may find this shocking because maybe your kids are not spending that much time. Maybe some others are spending too much. And so it's averaging out to approximately this much, which is comparable to the time kids spend in school. Not only that, it is also growing faster than the content for adults is growing as a segment. So if you look at FIGS plus UK, this is France, Italy, Germany, and Spain plus UK, the kids' profiles on Netflix streamed 3.6x more content on Netflix in 2022 than in 2018. And you compare that with the normal profiles or the adult profiles, that grew only 1.8x in comparison. So essentially what we're comparing are the kids' profiles in the pink over here versus the all other profiles put together. So you'll see that kids' profiles are streaming content at a much higher rate and growing much faster. And consequently, it's attracting advertising revenue as well. US ad investment in children's content and in programming grew by 50% in 2022 to over $1.6 billion today. So it's probably clear at this point that this is both for content creation perspective and from a business perspective, a very interesting segment. And then finally, if you look at the spending on digital advertising on children's content worldwide, not just the US, from 2021 to 2023, you'll see a staggering growth over time, and it is projected to keep growing. We're happy to share these slides with the members of this audience, and so don't worry about taking notes right now. So those are the opportunities. Let's talk a bit about the considerations. There are a number of regulating powers globally that provide restrictions and recommendations on children's content, such as dubbing, age appropriateness, educational content, advertising content, merchandising, etc. We will talk a little bit about the regulatory framework and considerations as well today. And an interesting example is if you just look at the guidelines for what is considered children's content, it varies widely across the world. So if you take this one title, this is the age recommendation by different countries across the world. So what is adult content in Korea is rated as 6+ age group for Germany. So this varies widely as well as you go from territory to territory in the world. So with that backdrop, let's start our conversation today. Navigating the landscape of children's content and what Jetpack has done essentially in this space to stay ahead. Why don't we start with a closer look at what Jetpack does? Dominic, would you be able to share with us an overview of Jetpack's business model, its scale of operations, etc.?
Yeah, we are a distribution company. So in TV terms, that means that we acquire content from producers and then we distribute that to platforms, broadcasters around the world. So we're based in London, but we work globally. So we have people here in London, we have some in Canada as well. The idea being that for us at least, content can be created anywhere and consumed anywhere. So we've really made it the kind of core ambition of the company to be sort of territory agnostic in a sense. What we're looking for when we acquire content is high quality content that stands out in the crowd. Personally, if it's supposed to be funny, it's got to make us laugh. If it's supposed to be education, it's got to actually teach us something. So, core values are really important for us. And we've been good at curating a catalog. So, in essence, we don't just represent one piece of IP at any one point in time. We have a catalog where we now have over 1,000 episodes of series which we're distributing. We work with around about 60 producers at last count. Some producers work exclusively with us, some work with multiple distributors. It differs from one producer to the next. The core of what we do is about being independent
Okay.
And a lot of the companies we work with are independent companies. Some of them are from, have other lines of business in gaming or in toys, and they also have, content that they produce, which we represent for them. Some of them are more atypical animation studios, or sometimes they are, a general producer of all types of
Mm.
content, and we look after their kids' shows. So effectively, it's a sort of, we are the buying and selling end of content. So it's our goal to stay ahead. We know what's trending. We know what people are looking for. So we provide, as well as selling and making money, we also provide intel,
Mm.
market, research for the producers that we work with. Because we are relatively small compared to some of the bigger companies, we call ourselves, we're more of a boutique solution. So we're quite, very friendly, very approachable. We're very much about developing one-on-one relationships with people. And that I think, has enabled us to be successful. We're now coming up for our 10th year,
Mm-hmm.
which
Congratulations.
I think is a good measure of we're doing something okay.
Yeah,
People coming back to us.
gotcha. So if I were to summarize that, you're essentially a global distributor of children's content. You acquire from about 60 plus producers, obviously growing, and you're territory agnostic and you distribute across the world. How many outlets are you distributing to? So we know there are about 60 plus producers that are providing content to you that you're acquiring. Where is this content going?
That's a very good question. I would probably guess somewhere in the region, I haven't looked that up, probably in the region of about 100, maybe 100 plus, I guess, customers in effect. Yeah, it's probably, we certainly, I think we've worked or licensed to almost every country in the world today. Every year we kind of get one new one that we've done a direct deal with. But yeah, I think that's probably about 100, 150 perhaps is the size of the market.
Okay. So could you name a few platforms that we would all be familiar with?
Oh,
Like,
this is one of those dangerous questions where I kind of like, make three people really happy and then insult everybody else. I forget to mention. But look, we work with we work with people, the global platforms like Netflix, Nickelodeon, Warner Brothers, Disney. That's a given, but we also work with all the big local public service channels like BBC, France Television, Super RTL, Kika, and so on. So like I said, I don't think there's anybody we haven't worked with, but we also do deals with small startup type operations. Like this year in the UK, we just did a new fast channel that's just launched here. We've licensed some content to them. They're called Muchi, and so we try and come up with solutions that fit that every consumer, every channel out there. New channels, new startups typically don't have a lot of budget to spend, so they may be looking for sort of slightly different economics to their deals. And so we try to make sure that we're in there. I mean, we worked with the Roku, like right in the beginning when they were looking for their own kids content. US AVOD platforms, Cartoon Channel, those guys, those kind of deals. We've got stuff on YouTube that we placed for other people. So yeah, it's pretty much anywhere where content is being consumed for kids. We try to be there. Could be hotels and airlines as well.
wow. Okay. So there is nothing that is out of purview for you.
No, I don't think so. I mean, this is one of the joys of having a catalog is you've always got a piece of content that, has a different value to it than another that you can work with different
Yeah.
platforms. Yeah, for us, you know, there's obviously we represent the interests of the producer, and sometimes, you know, that means we've got to kind of, you know, make a check that the content's being used in a way that everybody is happy with. But effectively, yeah, there's no limitation really, as long as they're you know, reliable and reputable platform or business. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we're going to try to get a few learnings from your experience around, you know, how you've managed to thrive for 10 plus years.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you a few questions, which I'm assuming, you know, would be the most obvious questions to anyone who's trying to learn from you. But again, for audience members, if I miss anything interesting, feel free to put it in the Q&A box. So there are a few components to your business, but at a very high level, there is the acquisition side. Then
Yeah.
there's the management side where, you know, you understand the content, you understand you have a strategy around it. And then there is the sales side, and the mechanics of the sale with
Hmm.
distribution, royalties, etc.
Hmm.
The acquisition, management, and sales. If you were to look at it at this very, very high level, let's start by talking about acquisitions. Um, you said you acquire from 60 plus producers. You tend to lean more towards independent content. Um, could you give us some context around why it is, you know, independent? Why do you focus on independent? What does that landscape look like? Do people come to you, or do you go to film markets to create a presence? Just paint a picture for us. Like, what does the acquisition world look like for you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's a very busy one
Yeah.
because, you know, it really is a funnel, you know, and we are part of this giant funnel where it people are either producing or looking to produce and finance and raising money, etc. You know, shows that could well be just in somebody's head, or they're just sketching it down on paper. Very early days of the creative process. You know, shows are coming into us all the time. People want to bounce ideas off us if they already have a relationship with us, you know, but we're kind of funneling it down. And even then we go on and sell it to the broadcaster again, the funnel just continues down to ultimately the viewer, or, you know, the consumer at the very end. So, you know, our part in that is to get through, you know, look at as many pieces of IP as we possibly can. There's no limitations other than the sort of size of our operation. And last year, it's an easy number to remember because we looked at 365 pieces of IP. So it was, you know, on average, it was one a day. Um, and when I say look at it, you know, it's been, somebody has sent us materials, we reviewed it. Sometimes it'll go to like the team reviewing. So whereas the acquisitions team will bring something in, it will then open up to the wider team for everybody to kind of read the Bible, look at the trailer, read the script, you know, the treatment, whatever it is we've been sent. And then we kind of, you know, give our own feedback, which sometimes allows us to get very relevant feedback for specific territory, because if that salesperson represents something specific, they'll be speaking on behalf of, is it sellable in their territory, or are there any, you know, there may be some reasons why it isn't sellable in one territory, but it may be in another. So we iron all those things out through that initial on submission process. Once it's got through that, and if there's a consensus that we think it's strong, that we believe in the producer, because it's not just the IP, it's the people behind the IP. You know, as some people say, that when you join forces, it's like, you know, getting married a little bit. You're going to be in a project for a number of years. And so, you know, it's important that the producer, the creator, whoever it is, and us, we're on the same page. We have the same ethos, I think, as much as obviously, you know, the basics. You know, because we are very emerged with some of our producers. You know, it's important that that relationship is strong. And so, So once it's been through submission, we like it. It's as simple as we make an offer, which for us is just an outline of our standard terms. Make it official. Here's
Yeah,
a kind of templated deal memo. Here's our offer, and that's our stake in the ground to say we're serious.
yeah,
Uh, sometimes we're in a lovely situation where they only want to work with us, so that's just great because then that's went straight to negotiation.
yeah,
But more often than not, it's we're in a competitive environment. If somebody's got they're an established producer with a strong IP
yeah,
that is well financed or potentially will be well financed, then we'll be in a competitive market with a number of other distributors, and so yeah, that's when we have to start to do our belly dance to sort of be selected. Yeah, so then, and so we're going through this process all the time.
yeah.
It's 52 weeks a year process for us.
So why would a producer of a children's content, who, let's say, has multiple options, opt to work with you versus a more, let's call it, broad distributor? You
Sure.
know, the question is mostly around why specialist versus generic distributor.
Yeah, I mean this because I guess every producer has a different strategy themselves. Some of them are quite well versed in the business, so they may come to us with half of the world already sold. Like they're not coming in saying, "Oh, we need to finance this thing" or whatever. They're like, "We've actually done 6 pre-sales already. We've done big chunky deals with the US and we've got Germany done and whatever."
Hmm.
And there are, for us, that's still a conversation we're happy to have. We don't have a prerequisite. We don't need the entire world. We're not there's no deal too small, really,
Yeah.
that we wouldn't consider.
So
Some like
what's the
people bring us up.
compelling value proposition of being a specialist in this space? Is there some domain expertise that, can really add value to this? Is this a relationship-driven business where, your decades of experience and relationships in this space really matter? If I'm
Yeah,
somebody
it's a
who's
very you
yeah,
you've hit the nail on the head there with relationship. I mean, I think anybody who works in TV and video, they will probably always say the same thing. It's a very personal industry. I think certainly has been for years. The art of selling is about developing a relationship with your customer. We're not a retailer. We know who our customer is. We know them very, very well, and we've met them many, many, many times before, and we socialize with them. So this is very different than a straight retail or online transaction.
right,
Um, and so, yeah, I know people have tried to solve our industry challenges by coming up with more solutions, but it's very, very tricky to replace that, I guess, trust as well,
yeah,
that the clients have in us, that they know when they sit down for a meeting with us. They may have a rough idea what we're going to show them, but we always work on that classic, surprise and delight model that you want to see the look on their face. You want to see them smile and laugh and engage with the IP, which you just don't get when you're not in person. But also it's about, curating a number of options. So we're not always just pushing, like I said, one thing. There's maybe at any particular market, we might have 2, 3, 4 new things that we want to try on them, because you want to give them choice and not be not just showing them one thing because that's what your company does. We're not just a mono product kind of organization. So it makes experience, I think, as a buyer a little bit more interesting. There's
right,
always a chance, I'm going to come out with something.
yeah,
Uh, Whereas some of the big companies, not to say their business model is wrong, it's just different. They may only have one product, right? And they own it, they make it, they're selling the toys for it. and it's either you want to buy it or you don't want to buy it. It's simple as that.
That makes sense. So when you say that a lot of it comes down to relationships, I'm assuming it's relationships both with with the producers and the buyers, so the sellers and the buyers. Um, could you tell us about what your year looks like when you think about, we're in January now. Is this your first
Yeah.
full market of the year? How many markets do you do? What are the key stops along the year where, people can find you there? Or
Yeah. We try to go to as many. We have representatives at pretty much every market that you could call a market, I suppose. So we just kicked off with Content Americas last week in Miami, which is a broader Latin North America market, covers all genres. And then that flows into what we're going to talk about later, the KIDSCREEN Summit, which always takes place in February. This year's over in San Diego on the West Coast. Once February is out of the way, we merge into mid-TV again. Big multi-genre market in Cannes, and then there's an animation festival which has a market attached in Annecy, which is the market's called MIFA. And that's very well attended, but dedicated especially to animation, both movies and TV. It's one of the few markets where the theatrical business and the TV business overlap, although it's all in the animation sphere. And there's also a festival attached, which makes it, a little bit more interesting if you're a consumer or a fan and you want to find out what's going on. That's great. And then after Annecy, we have a few dedicated conferences, one in the UK for CMC in July, and then we have Cartoon Forum, again, animated, European focused. Then it's MITCOM, which arguably still the kind of biggest market in the world for all genres of television. And then we finish off the year. There are two events that are in our calendar. One is the ATF in Singapore, and also NIP Cancun in Latin America. Again, two very regionally focused markets. And there's probably a couple of little ones in between that we go to, little festivals and things like that. But yeah, it's very important to be there for us, both buying and selling, chance to meet producers, chance to talk about the new shows that we're doing and we're working on.
Yeah, okay. So what I'm getting from you so far, if I distill my thinking here, first, you're talking about this being a relationship-driven business. So the experience and the focus and the being a specialist versus a generic distributor actually adds to those relationships. Second, you're talking about being on the ground in different parts of the world, at different events. And it's a 52 weeks a year job. There are no weeks off, except maybe Christmas. I don't know if you take that week off.
Oh no, but it is pretty quiet over Christmas in certain territories. Again, there are certain territories where Christmas isn't really important, so you still get, inquiries and expectations even during the Christmas period.
Well, you do go to ATF, which I believe is in December, isn't it?
Yeah, it's at the beginning of December. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a busy time, because often the thing about markets is it's great when you can get lots of intel, you make lots of meetings, but the hard bit is after the market when you have to do all those follow-ups. You have to send all those carefully created, emails, each one tailored to each individual meeting you had, because, and it's the skill in our job. And I guess the bit people don't see, the behind the scenes, is about creating follow-ups that are accurate, succinct, and give the information to the buyer in a sort of timely fashion is really, really important. And probably the bit that, if you ask most salespeople, probably the bit they hate more than anything is having to go home and do, after a big week of talking and having fun, and it's down to business, in front of the computer with your email, it's not fun.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, that's where Molten comes in, right? So,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. But that's
ex-
where the money's made, right? If you don't do those, then you're not making a sale.
exactly. Then, all this travel is not worth much because the follow-ups are not keeping up with it. Yeah.
Completely, completely. And
So,
that's why technology comes in. That's where what's changed over the many, many years that I've been doing it is the ability to follow up quickly, succinctly. We don't have to stuff CDs into jiffy bags anymore. you
yeah,
know.
exactly. Yeah. We can probably touch a little bit about how you do that as well.
Yeah.
To summarize, your three key strategies that I took away from your talk were the relationship and focus, the on-ground, travel and be where the action is. Um, then there is the surprise and delight. You want to work with multiple types of content, not that one big brand name content. Um, and then finally is the technology piece to be
Mm.
in following through with the conversations and getting them to a close. Um, Perhaps on that note, given that, your team and my team work very closely on the technology piece, could you shed some light on what is the workflow there, how you're, efficient there, and perhaps even how you use Molten in the mix of all your tech tools and
Yeah.
workflows?
I mean, when I started the company, if I didn't really know a lot about distribution. I'd spent my prior experience in career being on the other side. I was a buyer, so I knew all about the meeting bit and the pitching and the conversation and the negotiation about sure I could that I'd experienced, but what I didn't know was what goes on in the back office part of a distribution business.
Right.
That bit I had to learn when I came in. And naturally I'm quite kind of tech curious. Well, I think I've always stayed ahead in terms of social media and hardware and etc. So I was always looking for is there a better tech solution to this, doing it this way? How do we improve our internal processes? How do we remove, because we're a small company and you're always looking to minimize your costs and get as much out of as few people as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of things that have never changed in this industry. Number one is the contract, right? The thing that nobody seems to have managed to change in the history of me doing it is what a deal memo looks like, or what a standard term template agreement. And I'm pretty sure that the same template we started using 10 years ago is the same template we're using today, with obviously terms modified, but the structure, the amount of pages. So we do that side of it is something that you have to learn.
Yeah.
There's no solution to that. It's like you learn how to do it. You learn how to give notes in Word. You learn how to share that with a lawyer, and you understand what a red line is. And if somebody can replace lawyers, that would be an amazing solution. But I don't see that going away. But also that point, and you were talking about the workflow, is
Yeah.
once that deal is done, and that in itself can take many months.
Yeah.
um we have to record that information somewhere, and then that and you speak to anybody in distribution, they're probably no aside from follow-ups, their number one gripe will be their rights management, because it is very intricate. Everything contract is slightly different.
Yeah.
Every contract, has many, somebody's done some exceptional agreement on something, and you have to record all this information, and not only record it, but ultimately what we record is as good as what we can sell. And it has to be accurate, it has to be accessible, and it has to be done in a way that the person using it trusts the system. And what
Yeah.
I found was when I spoke to a lot of people in the past, it's a lot of people don't trust their own systems. They don't trust their own data. So they'll end up like, go back and check the contract. I'll go back and check the contract. It's pretty much just to be sure.
Yeah.
And it's a waste of time. But and so when we, started working with you, that was really important to us, and you understood that where that was coming from, getting the data out, making it user friendly, because of course your team changes and you have to train them up how
Yeah.
to use the system, and it's important everybody does it. Um, and once we've collected all that data, that is what you want to export when somebody says, could you get me an avails list for Tajikistan in animation for preschoolers? We're starting in March 2025, and you want to be able to, and can you do it in an hour? Is that okay? Because that's all
Yeah.
buyers have no
100,000
concepts. They have no concept of time. Like when they buy, they take forever to make a decision. But when they want information, they want it like, we need it like tomorrow. Is that okay? So that's how it goes. So you got to be able to export data quickly. And importantly on the sales side, once because that's often what you do before you meet, right? You make sure what's available to sell, is that you want to be able to follow up, and you want to follow up with something that is attractive to look at, that's user friendly, has all the information. And that's, again, credit to Molten developing a system that allows us to create avails that look nice and got the right links and the right data and the right passwords in all the right places,
Mm.
so that buyer, number one turn off of a buyer when I was, and this is really kind of simple, is you click on a link and it doesn't work, or
Mm.
the password, and you then go, oh, I have to email them to ask them for the password, and just at that point your phone rings and you go home, you answer that phone, you've forgotten what that, you've moved on. And it's
The
it's
deal
it's so
never happened.
important, it's so important. So that's, for us, the tech end of it with Molten. We also, we've been using Salesforce for tracking our entire company, our CRM on all, the hundreds of clients that we have. So yeah, we've tried at least to be as a sort of tech forward as
Yeah.
as we can be. And just utilizing mobile, because we're a work from home company,
Yeah.
so all tech has got to self-manage. We don't have an IT department, so it's
We're
we
your IT department in a way.
yeah, well, exactly, and that's part of it. It's having partnerships with companies that appreciate the size we are. So it's not, once they sold the solution, the app, that then they go away and forget about you. You want to kind of co-develop the thing together.
Yeah. Well, these are all amazing insights, and I feel like I could talk to you for 3 hours straight. But let's keep going here. Let's talk a little bit about KidScreen specifically.
Yeah.
Um, and since we're coming up on time here, we'll just try to keep it shorter. So we'll save about, 5 to 8 minutes just for questions. I can see a few have come in from the audience. Um, what is KidScreen, and how does one really prepare for optimizing their experience there if it's, let's say, their first time at KidScreen?
If it's your first time, KidScreen's a great place to immerse yourself in the entire industry. And when I mean entire industry, the kind of business of kids, really. Everything from what content they're watching, what toys they're playing with, what their favorite games are, because all of the people who attend KidScreen are coming from all these different areas, and we're all congregating in this one space, so there's an opportunity to go to sessions which are very educational and very informative. There's loads of networking opportunities, some of which are organized by KidScreen themselves, some of which are just more social, the classic cocktail party kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there's a great chance to see upfront, in person, listening to particular buyers and key decision makers, through the 30 minutes with sessions, for example. And to this day, as long as I've been in it, there's always somebody new that I don't know that's just come in as a new role and a new job. And the easiest way to get to know them is go to their 30 minutes with, because you hear everything about them. And also, if you've got something that you're trying to sell,
Yeah.
you do your homework of who you think you're trying to sell it to and for what reason. They do a great, have their website. If you're you paid and you're a subscriber, or sorry, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, you're an attendee,
Yeah.
you can go and find people on there searching by company or what the job is, and it has a little photo of them, which is even better because then you know exactly what they look like. Should you be stood in a coffee queue next to them or whatever, you can make sure you're use the time in advance of the actual session itself, because it's very busy.
Yeah.
And it's, these things are great, and they can be very, if you haven't had the opportunity to make lots of in-person meetings, because people are hard to reach, and we started booking meetings in December,
Yeah.
and we filled up quite quickly. And imagine if you're the head of buying it for Disney, imagine how many emails they've had to get through. But it's just it's good to just know who people are. Try and utilize speed pitching. I'm doing a speed pitching session on Wednesday at 2 o'clock. So people will probably have already subscribed to that, but there'll be a lot of other, opportunities maybe to try and get in if you're selling a show or
Yeah.
a piece of content. Yeah, I mean, I think if you're into the kids business, KIDSCREEN's a really good place to start, because everybody is interested in kids. Whereas at MIPCOM, you may be
Yeah,
stood
that's
next
true.
to a Norwegian format salesman and he's not really interested in your kids solution. So with KIDSCREEN, everybody's going to be interested because we're all in the same business.
That's a great insight. All right, so I'm going to take a few audience questions here, and then I've got a bunch more, but I'll just pause my questions for a bit. Um, so I'll take them in random order. There's one interesting question that came in. It says, I'm a new distributor that is just starting to connect with platforms and broadcasters. What is the one key thing to keep in mind when I'm starting to build these relationships with my buyers?
I think believe in your product.
Mm.
I know that, may be very obvious, but I think if you're new, the first time they meet you, they want, if you get that opportunity, it may be on an escalator, right? Whatever it is, just be very informed who they are and informed by what your show is about. Really be confident in and believe in your IP, because when you're starting out, it may not be the best shows you're ever going to have in your career. There may be better ones to come in the future, but it doesn't matter. You've really got to be sort of, know what it is you're selling, and importantly, know why the person you're talking to might want to buy it. That you've got to frame it that in the right way, and don't waste time selling something to somebody that they just don't want, because if you've done
Yeah.
your homework, you should have an idea of the things they don't want.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a very vibrant group of audience members here, so we've got lots of questions for you. Another one is, what is the best marketing? What are the best marketing techniques for animated films? Um,
Best marketing techniques. I mean, we've used a lot of digital marketing. We, in fact, post pandemic, we increased our digital marketing. It,
okay.
it seemed to be it seemed to be more relevant than print, because I think distribution of print obviously dropped a bit during the pandemic. People weren't at markets as much to actually receive things. So I think utilizing digital, but also because we've all got our own social networks, and if you've used LinkedIn long enough, I think there are ways to get your IP in front of buyers that are not expensive as well, because it's kind of, if you're paying for placement, fine, but you can also reach a lot of people that way. It's relatively
Gotcha.
economical.
Right, so I'm gonna go rapid fire here with a bunch more questions.
Okay.
Another question is, how developed should a Bible be for your consideration?
Okay, there are two schools of thought. One is, if the IP is already known,
Yeah.
then you don't need to go into too much detail because the buyer may already be familiar with what you're talking about. If it comes from a known book, you can lean into the book. If it's something that's completely original, like never seen before, I think it's really important to not leave any questions. The Bible should really be, by that stage, should be answering every question. I mean, I'm not saying that Bible's going to stay the exact way it is for until production, but I think you should really make sure you're not don't leave it too empty, too open-ended. I think there's a typical format for Bibles which you can research, go to conferences and ask people. There are people who specialize in it. It's important to get the Bible right, because that's not only using it to pitch, but it's the one thing you leave behind
Yeah.
if you don't have anything else.
Right. So part two of this question was, would you jump in on a project at the script stage and try to sell directly to a platform, or is that too early for you?
We wouldn't try and sell with only a script, but
Right.
we would definitely start the conversation with the producer with only a script. I mean, if it's animation, we obviously need to see a script plus some of the character designs, perhaps backgrounds, but not essential. Environments useful, but if it's live action, then obviously it's more about doing like a mood board or showing, the kind of how it might look when it's completed. But in live action, is the script is, really the sort of main piece of the pitch, because
Another interesting
you've got
question.
cast that you can't show. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. Another interesting question is 3D animation nowadays the only strong selling tool? In other words, is 2D animation a no-go?
Not at all. I don't think so. No. I think 3D has definitely in movies
Yeah.
has pretty much. I don't know what the stats are, but I imagine it's 9 out of 10, maybe even higher, right? But in TV, I don't think so at all. People are much more even, stop frame and play motion, and there are lots and lots of opportunities. And the what is 2D and what is 3D is also blending. People are doing hybrid versions. They're doing 3D to look like 2D, and that's kind of telling. It's really it's a method of production, I think, which is more interesting for a lot of people. If it's like Unreal that's quite exciting because that's actually like efficiencies of production rather than. I don't think the kids are that prescriptive as like I will watch one or the other. I think it might be sometimes more particular buyers like to think that one thing works better than the other because they're following a trend.
Yeah.
But in my experience, Pokemon is probably, as far as I'm aware, still 2D and still probably one of the biggest brands in the world, has been for 20 odd years. I think if they made it 3D, I don't think it'd make any difference. It's still, the storytelling and the characters, which are number one, and
Yeah,
in what's important.
I can see that. Another interesting question, which I personally don't have much context to, maybe you do, is when will the domestic marketplace return? Failing that, where do you see the financier opportunities in the future?
Okay, I think maybe they're talking about the US marketplace by calling it domestic, because as far as we went, only Americans call their market domestic.
Sure.
So, and I think by if they're saying domestic marketplace return, the US marketplace has definitely kind of stuttered for a while. I think one might say there was, maybe an over supply of content, and the economics have not followed for some of those big companies, and mergers and writer strikes and blah blah blah. It's definitely not been, but in my experience, it's never been easy to get shows onto any platform in the United States. I think it's easier now that there are secondary platforms, without making them sound derogatory, but like the AVOD space, you can
Yeah.
now, or for the fast channel space, there are opportunities to get your content that may have been created elsewhere, because getting first run in the US has always been very, very difficult. And the primary reason for that is, the studios who dominate
Yeah.
The majority of their output is their own content. Um, if that's going to change the next couple of years, I mean, I've heard people saying, well, this studio might want to co-produce more, which they've never co-produced in their life, right? Some of the American studios, they may have co-produced in Canada, but they've never co-produced anywhere else. But then when you dig in a bit deeper, and it was just the studios co-producing with each other. So it's still hard if you're not as part of that studio system, or, breaking into the US. I think the US will, I mean, I think it can only go up. I think this year has been probably, I think, one of the lowest years in terms of volume of commissions and green lights. And I think it will probably normalize in late 24, 25.
Yeah, I think we're seeing that.
As soon as possible, ideally.
Yeah. I think last year was a little bit difficult, at least domestically within the US, not just in its content space, but across different.
These are all kind of economical, and I mean, advertising is struggling. The kids still consume content, as you said earlier. The rate of consumption is still enormous.
Yeah.
And still, they're looking for the next big thing. They're looking for something else that they can be passionate about, that their older brother doesn't know about, that their younger sister doesn't know about. Kids are the unique thing about kids is, there's a new ones every 3 years, different photographs, and they're constantly looking for something that's going to be theirs, right? And not their older brothers, right? And you've always got that opportunity. But yeah, economically getting things financed, I think hopefully things will start moving a bit faster in the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, we're all looking forward to that.
We all look forward to that, for sure. I think it's just, even though it doesn't affect everywhere, it's a good bellwether for our business.
Yeah.
Everybody wants all ships to rise, because then we all benefit.
So let's conclude here. It's right on the hour. Hopefully, we'll see several members from this audience at KIDSCREEN.
Please stop and say hi if you saw me live today. Yeah, please. Always curious to hear people's own stories and experience.
Yeah. So we have several unanswered questions here. We'll try to get to them via email. If you'd like a video copy of today's conversation, feel free to ping Molten. Otherwise, I'm sure our marketing department will send you a follow-up with a link to the video. The main takeaways are essentially that I'll summarize my takeaways. At least I learned a lot from you today. Hopefully others did too. What I could see is that there is a separate focus that is required. Specialists have a real value add over here in the kids marketplace. Relationships, surprise and delight, technology differentiation are some of the ways that the specialists are really staying ahead of the curve. The kids market has its own sort of year-long tour that one can follow. And KIDSCREEN is a great place to start that year-long tour. Really immerse yourself in the kids market with specialists and networking opportunities. Did I miss anything, Dominic?
No, I think that, I think you summed it all up. The one thing I was just thinking was that just how global we are. I think there's the transference of content from India to Latin America, from Latin America to Japan, and everything in between. I think that's quite unique in the kids business. So and it's something I think we should celebrate, and I always look forward to seeing new and exciting content from everywhere in the world.
All right. I'm sure some members of this audience will reach out to you with new and exciting content.
Right.
This is just some more statistics, but essentially the takeaway, at least that I had coming into the kids market, was that these are not just, 3-year-long relationships while you're kids, but, adults still engage with kids content to this day. So we'll see where the next generation of kids content goes, but immense potential here for quality relationships and content and value add in people's lives. So we did the Q&A, and with that, we'll end here. We're just a couple of minutes over. Dominic, can't thank you enough for all the insights you shared. I'm not a specialist in this space, but I learned a ton from you today. So thank you for all of that. And for people in the audience, if you need a recording of this or you want to connect with Dominic as well, or anything that we can do as hosts of this webinar, feel free to reach us, contact@moltencloud.com. We'd be more than happy to connect with you and maybe even connect you with Dominic from there if that's something you're interested in. Dominic, thank you again.
Thank you,
And
Arjun.
see you all at hopefully San Diego soon.
Yeah, see you there. Thanks very much.